Hey guys, good afternoon and happy Sabbath everybody. Good to see you, Roger, Dion. How has the
I think
week
you're
been,
muted.
gentlemen?
Handsome. Pastor Paul, you're muted.
Is Pastor Paul muted?
Am I
Seems
muted?
that way. You're looking for the button now.
Okay.
Button is pushed on my end, so I'm not sure why
All
you're
right.
not hearing me. You're still not hearing me?
I tell you, it's been a rough couple of shows.
No, man. But you know what? Hey, listen, ministry still continues. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true. That is so true.
All right. All right.
Okay.
And still nothing.
Can you
guys
we're
aren't
not hearing
me
you
at
in
all.
the show, so I don't know if you heard that.
Okay, I can hear myself. Let me ask the guests, can you guys that are out there, can you guys hear me?
And I'm not sure. All right. I can see that something is going out because he's
Yes, okay.
There you go.
There now, I think they could hear me. I think you guys could not hear me.
Oh,
So I think that's
and
how
I'm
we
not
are.
sure if they could hear us.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
they
so
can
we-
hear you as well now.
yeah, I
All
think,
good, all
I
good.
think
Well,
everybody
man.
is fine now.
All right, everybody's good. One of these days, I keep telling them, everybody, one of these days, we're going to get one of these things that we're going to pull off that's perfect. That's how we want it to be. So we are happy to be back with you guys this week. I think this is week number 18 that we have been with you.
Yes,
Wow.
yes.
Those weeks are going by quick, but we are excited to be with you today. We got some great stuff ahead, but just before we get started, I hear somebody saying, I can hear from Honduras. So my mic is not muted in Honduras.
Praise the
So
Lord.
that's working. Praise the Lord for that. Well, we're glad to have you with us today. So, Dr. Henry, we understood, you were telling us just before the show that you just got off a road trip. Tell us about that road trip, man. Where were you?
Yes.
What was going
Well,
on?
listen, this, as you know already, this has been a very busy week with my adult children. We dropped them off at Oakwood, Huntsville, Alabama. And on Friday, we had hoped to leave early in the morning. But, you know, it's the last minute stuff. You just love your kids. You just want to make sure they're okay. You get the last hugs and the kisses and all the good stuff. And we finally left at 6 p.m. last night. So it's been a night.
6 p.m. So you drove all
That's
night
right.
then, hey.
Well, no, listen, hey, 20 years ago, I would have done it. But this time, I listened to the counsel of my wonderful wife. She said, listen, we need to stop. So we did make a stop at one of my colleagues' house there in St. Louis and had a good rest and got on the road this morning, and we're back here in KC. And so to God be praised. To God be praised.
All right,
Wonderful,
all right.
wonderful.
We get a hello from Trinidad in the West Indies. Hello, welcome to the Pastors Roundtable today.
All
Listen,
right,
guys, we
yes.
have an awesome topic today. So, Roger, what's on the table today, man?
Wow, I tell you, I've been waiting for this opportunity so long to be able to talk to my treasurers.
Ah,
Well, guys, we have actually started this show to talk about ministry, the structure, how we're working, what are some of the things we can do better, and one of the biggest questions that keeps coming up is finances. How are the money? What's the money? How are we doing? What can we do with it? And so today we are just so blessed to be dealing with our series called the Mission and Structure of the Church. We're going to look at the mission. We're going to look at the structure. We're going to ask the question put on the lens of finances. Are we meeting the needs of the mission and structure of the church? And this is your opportunity to delve into this topic with us, to lean in. You can key in your questions. We're going to be prayerfully talking to 3 levels of our structure when it comes to our chief financial officer. So we're excited about the topic.
awesome.
So the question now is, who's at the table? Tell us.
Yeah, Raj, who do we have, man? You're heading this up. Tell us, who do we have at the
Listen.
table? That's what's on the table. Who's at the table? Who's cooking?
At the table. Well, today we are just so blessed, as I shared. I kind of gave it away. We have 3 levels of our financial system leaders here. We are just so blessed to have with us from the Florida Conference, the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer of the Florida Conference. We affectionately call the Treasurer of the conference, Miss Elisa Rahming. Welcome to the Pastors Roundtable. We also have with us from the Atlantic Union, the Chief Financial Officer, affectionately called the Treasurer of the Atlantic Union, just recently became minted doctor in the needs of the church, Elias Zabala Sr. Welcome to the Pastors Roundtable.
All right.
We also have with us the Chief Financial Officer of the North American Division, Pastor Randy Robinson. So they are our guests at the table
Southern
today.
Union.
So let's welcome them to our table.
All right. So glad to have them. Look, and they can't see you guys yet. And just before they do, Roger, you mentioned some questions that we had. And if you guys don't mind, we posted earlier in the week to let some of our audience ask some questions. I want to read 3 of them. So we put a flyer up, and some people had some questions. And we may or may not get to all of these in the show, but I just wanted to read them to kind of start stuff off. Is that all right, guys?
Yeah.
Number 1, this one came. Yeah, I'm starting stuff. This one says, it is clear that ministry will not turn to business as usual. We must continue to grow our online community. Have you considered creating paid ministry roles for AV leaders and producers? This individual says, Dwayne Dorsch says, I personally have been spending 30 plus hours a week filming, editing, and producing our weekly online services. So they're wondering, is there some money in the pipeline for this brand new role that our context puts us in? Number 2, from Dwayne as well, says the conference spends on human resources, but not on physical buildings, leaving churches to maintain buildings that they do not own. 70 to 90% of most church budgets go towards the building, leaving little for real ministry. This structure is not sustainable. How can priorities be adjusted at the conference level to support the physical needs of the local church? That's an interesting question as well. And then finally, last question reads, why this one is going all right, why is the storehouse the conference? Why is the storehouse the conference, Elisa? The conference uses tithe money to pay utilities, maintenance on the headquarters building, etc. But the local church cannot use tithe monies for those purposes. The younger generation is not buying into this structure. We need radical financial overhaul. Then he ends it with, do it now while you still have a choice. Do it now while you still have a choice. Let's bring everybody on. Then we're going to have a word of prayer and we'll get in to our questions. Welcome our guests, everybody. We're excited to have them. Now they see you all on screen. But let's have a word of prayer just before we get into our discussion for today. Father, we thank you that you are a God who provides when your children are in need. We ask that as we share in these next few moments, that you would guide our conversation, that you would be with us so that at the end of the show, we might have a better understanding of how mission and structure work together. And Father, if there are places and ways and things that we need to do to tweak, to make it more effective, to make it more efficient, we're asking that you would reveal it to us, for we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. We lost Dr. Henry. So as you try to get him back, Pastor Paul, we'll jump right in. There he is. There he is. Wonderful. That was a quick catch. Awesome. Well, folks, we are just so happy to have these treasurers here with us.
Yes.
They were concerned about making sure that they get to answer all the questions. So we'll give them as much time. And like we said, if you would like to join us in asking, we shared 3 of the questions. If you have any more, please do. If you know there's someone that needs to join us, you can share this video with them, share this post. with them at this time, and we're going to get started. So the first question, and it's for anyone. A preacher has been heard said the gospel is free, but ministry costs.
Mercy.
What is the funding structure of the church, and how does it help the mission? What's the funding structure of the church, and how does it fund the mission? Anyone?
So I'll share. For me, the funding structure of the church is a beautiful thing. It's enabled us to reach over 20 million people and counting worldwide. And God has used our funding financial structure to reach far and near. And so, we have it at the local level. The local offerings remain in the church for ministry at the local level. And then the tithe dollars primarily are used at the conference level to fund the missionaries in the field, to fund the missionaries in the local level, our pastors and our educators. And then some of those tithe dollars also go up throughout North America to the rest of the world church. And so God has used finances and the structure as a platform to reach people for him. And we're the envy of many other churches in the Protestant world because of our financial structure and because of how things are set up. So that's just kind of a summary. We can go a little bit more in detail, but that's just a summary to start things off with.
Okay.
Yeah, Pastor Roger, I would add that our founding fathers back in the later portion of the 19th century, as they were considering how to deal with the actual physical structure of the organization, had some options. They could have set up a structure that said, okay, everybody raise money in your local space and deal with your local space however you can with the money you have locally. We could have done it that way, which is, we call that a more congregational type model. But the founding fathers really looked to Scripture and looked at the admonition that Jesus gave us to reach the whole world. So they had to figure out how to put a structure together that would minister and reach a worldwide audience. And so that's kind of where our financial structure was born. And I simplify it and say it this way: when I return one tithe dollar, any member returns one tithe dollar. That tithe dollar touches every area of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, both locally, regionally, and worldwide. In other words, part of my tithe dollar, when I give it in North America, where I live in Maryland, in my local church, it affects my local church, and it also provides resources for a church in India or Africa or Australia. Wow. That's an amazing structure, and I love it, and I think it's divinely appointed.
Wow, that is true.
Yeah, I want to give my input as well here. First of all, good afternoon to everybody and all our viewers. And I want to corroborate with my colleague, the host of this awesome program, to go ahead and share it with somebody out there so that other people can benefit from what we are doing here this afternoon. And so I believe that the system that we have currently has served the church very well. So I want to concur with my two colleagues here. And I want to say that perhaps is time, and there has been time, to review it and to ensure that it's cost effective, to make sure that it's also being geared intentionally into ministry. Because as my fellow pastors say, the gospel is free, but ministry costs. I mean, from the beginning, you trace the scripture. It has been a cost for the Levi to maintain the sanctuary. There was a cost for the disciple to transport themselves from one area, from Philippi to all the Caesarea area, and to the end of the earth. So there has been a cost. What needs to be ensured is that what we are doing is actually cost effective.
Wow. Yeah. So I think, much of the conversation that we hear these days is either, I'm just going to be honest. We say that this show is about being, this program is about being, what do we say? Relevant,
real,
resource, and real. And to be real, one of the biggest gripes that we, at least I hear as at the local level, the pastoral level, is about what we do as an organization with money. And so we wanted to provide this opportunity to give our listeners and members a better insight as to how that works. So it sounds like the answer is this, as far as what do we do? How does the funding structure, what is the funding structure, and how does that, it sounds like our funding structure is based on tithe. Would that be based on people?
That's primarily correct.
Okay.
Yes, tithe is the primary resource. It's not the exclusive resource. It is the primary resource.
Okay, talk to us about the other resources. What are the other resources? In fact, Dr. Henry got interested now.
I'm leaning forward, man.
Yeah. Well. Let me mention one significant one, and that is in the arena of planned giving. People choose to benefit the Seventh-day Adventist Church on all levels and in all areas in their estate plan. And many of those dollars that they provide through that mechanism are not tithe dollars. Some are. Some people return tithe through that mechanism, but a large portion of those dollars are not tithe dollars, and they are directed to all kinds of areas of ministry. Where that person may feel a burden. They help schools, they help churches, they help very specific ministries at different levels of the church. That's a pretty significant non-tithe, if we can call it that term, resource. So that's one of several.
So that sounds like an offering. So in other words, you're trying to say the Adventist Church is keeping it biblical with tithes and offerings, huh?
Absolutely.
All right, Elise, you look like you had something you were going to share.
Yeah, I'll mention another source is investment earnings. And so it just depends on the amount of investments that an entity has, whether it's investments in real estate or investments, mutual funds, or in the stock market that are safe and secure and according to North American division policy. So it's not in weapons and arms and other industries that we've had conversations in the past about. But according to North American division policy, those investments yield earnings, whether they're short-term, mid-term, or long-term. And those earnings can then be used to fund ministry and mission.
Okay. So wait a minute. Now, I grew up in this church. I did not know that the church invested in the stock market.
Yes, on a safe level, on a safe perspective. Diversity is key. Diversity is key with any kind of investment, so that's important as well.
Roger, just to add to what Elisa say, the model that we use is the moderate conservative in investment, which means that there is no sin stock out there. That's a word that we use, so that we do not be too aggressive trying to rip out everything that is out there, but also we remain moderate, not to lose in the process of investing God resources and be the foolish servant.
Awesome. That's good to know, because that at least lets me know that my church is actually on the cutting edge or on the front end of we're not like hiding our money under the mattress. I hate to point him out. I have a nephew that he didn't believe in the banks.
What's his name?
He would get his little money and he'll put it under the mattress. And I said, dude, you need everything was under the mattress for him. But I'm so glad that he got smart and now he's working with his parents
don't tell him where he lives, okay?
Listen, I got two follow-ups behind that, Roger, and that's this. So for our listeners, I think, where does that happen? At what level of the church structure are these investments happening? Is that a local conference? Do they invest in the stock market? Is that a union? Is that a division? Is that GC? Are local churches doing that? At what level? And then somebody said Anheuser-Busch. You don't invest in Anheuser-Busch. Correct. No, I don't think we do. At least I hope we don't. But then, and then how can people find out what levels are investing in stock market, and can they find out what we have invested in? Is there a website? Is there somewhere where they can go to find out? For some people might, have some issues, but as far as transparency goes, can they find out where we have our investments?
Sure, absolutely, Pastor. That is driven largely by North American division policy that's reviewed on a very regular basis.
Okay.
I deal with consultants, and as many others do, relative to how we invest our money. When it comes to operational types of money, at every level, at any level, we are much more conservative in that space, because those are dollars that are used to fund the basic operation, and I'm talking about paying pastors and teachers' salaries and those kinds of things. When it gets to more longer term dollars, you look at endowment type dollars that are out there for many years. We tend to get a little bit more aggressive with those dollars, but that's all very policy driven. And this type of investing happens at every level of the church. Probably if I can use this term, I don't like this term, but the higher in the organization you go, as you get into the unions and even the division and the general conference, probably the more dollars are invested in those spaces, because they're reaching farther out. A local church may not have the capacity to do that. But as you get into the wider portions of the organization, they have a little more capacity, only because of the functionality they're trying to meet and the dollars they're trying to leverage throughout the whole organization.
Okay. So go ahead, Arch. I'm sorry.
So I think we tapped into an area. We have a viewer that is asking, Cindy is asking a question, and I'm going to ask a pre-question to her question. You talked about the conference and the union, but more the union division kind of being the ones who do more of the investment. Is this something that a local church can get involved with, doing the investments? And if that's the case, what are the guidelines for that? Or are there no guidelines, or are there guidelines for a local church to look at investments for funds?
Yeah, so in Florida conference, we encourage churches to invest with our guidance. We encourage them to actually invest either in the revolving fund. In Florida, it's the Southern Union revolving fund. Many unions have their own revolving fund, which is much higher than industry banking standards, right? Mm-hmm. The interest rate is now between 1.25%, I think 1.5%. It just went down of 1%, compared to less than 1% that you get from most banks. So that's one of the options. And then we work with churches, usually the treasurers or someone from their finance team, if they want to invest further and take on a little bit more risk, but still calculated risk, and end up having to be able to earn or yield more. And so we don't encourage them to go and do it on their own, because some churches have the expertise and some churches don't. And so we're available to help them and kind of guide them along the way. And I could imagine that in other areas and other regions that it's probably similar to that as well.
Roger, if I may say here, we also have to maintain a level of diversification on all the investment, which is what really ensures that the church doesn't lose everything. Every time the stock market goes down, it's not like the church is losing a pile of money out there. No. Some organization could have anywhere from 15 to 25% in the stock market, and some others may have it in bonds or short-term investment. And so that is a diversification that you need. They all say out there, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So you have to maintain that level of diversification. The church, this is part of the guidelines. When the auditors come to us, this is one of the things that they look into the audits. The audit is a process that we have to go through every year. And so the auditors will make sure that the organization has maintained those levels of diversification, and is also is a guideline and it's directly by the guideline of the North American division as well.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
So how would you respond? And I know this is on there. I know I'm going a little rogue on our questions here, so my apologies. But how would you respond to that church member or that segment of the church who feels that simply by investing in the stock market or trying to get funds outside of tithes and offerings, that somehow we are moving outside of the biblical paradigm or the biblical method for funding the mission? How would you respond to that concern?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I guess I would disagree a little bit with the notion that we ought not to be invested. I think Jesus told a very clear parable about how we manage our resources, and I know he wasn't necessarily aiming at money in that particular example, but all the resources that we have, we ought to leverage to the best of our ability and be good stewards of those resources, and one of those is money. Certainly, we have to be very careful. What Elias said earlier in terms of making sure we're very diverse is key, and our policies are very, very clear about making sure we are safe and diverse. But I think we would do the church a disservice if we did not recognize the advantages provided to us by the marketplace. We do it carefully. We do it prayerfully, and we do it within guidelines and policies that are very transparent, that are checked annually. We check those things every year to make sure that we're within the appropriate guidelines. But I think the church has benefited over the years greatly because we have done that in a very careful, very prayerful, very organized way with expertise. People aren't just doing this willy-nilly and just kind of by the seat of their pants. No, this is we have experts involved that give us guidance, and I think the church has been, I know the church has benefited over the years because of that approach.
Okay.
I would like to add to the question, to the answer, that you see, it's not every dollar that the church receives and has available that is invested in any of those instruments. We also have in the church something called the revolving fund. It's managed at every union level. And what that does is that I can take the money and it's also controlled by the Security Exchange Commission. So it's what happened is that if, let's say, churches and individuals are investing their money with the revolving fund, and let me just throw a number out there. Let's say I have $20,000, or maybe use a bigger number to be realistic, $200 million. Let's say that there is $200 million out there in the revolving fund. What do I do? Well, what the revolving fund does is that they use that money in a form of an investment, and they lend it back to churches, to schools and conferences, to develop campsites, to develop churches, to buy properties, to expand parking lot, to repair buildings, change roof, to buy new buildings, all of that. And so the churches are able to secure a low interest loan, which is then to the revolving fund an investment, because I am still collecting some interest from that, so that I can pay the investor their portion, which is normally 1.25 or 1.50, the highest, I guess, right now. And so we are able to have that revolving action there. Like, you give me your money, I give it back to the churches. So if you are not comfortable with us, like saving out there in the stock market, be comfortable with the fact that there is this instrument that we use called the revolving fund that reinvest the money with the churches and is within the house.
Yeah. I think those are excellent responses on how we deal with our finances, because, we want to be like that faithful steward. When you get it, you want to make sure you multiply it. But I have a second question here for you. The church's mission is derived from Matthew 28 and Revelation chapter 14. And most churches either recite it or they just know it. However, sometimes there is a disconnect on how the mission of the church and the funds are connected. Any suggestions on how we can connect those two? Any suggestions on how we can accomplish the merger of the mission and the funds?
I think it's a great question. I go back to our forefathers, to our founding fathers, who were making that call, making that decision on how we build the structure, and I think divinely inspired was the notion that the one of the ideas is the stronger help the weaker. Those who are more able help those who are less able, and in connection with those two scripture references that you mentioned. How do we do that across the world? And the Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded in the United States of America. That's where the Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded. We had the resources back then that maybe some of the other parts of the world did not have as much of, but we wanted to share those resources across the world in a way that could start and foster and develop the church in the worldwide space. And so as you think about how those dollars flow, yes, even to this day, even at this moment, the North American division generates more tithe dollars individually than any other individual part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church worldwide. And we still want to share those resources and still do. So I am very much an advocate of the idea that we built a church that said, let's organize our tithe dollar. Let me use that mechanism. Let's organize our tithe dollar in a way that helps us locally, that helps us regionally, and helps us worldwide. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's lots of room for improvement. There's lots of room for conversation and discussion about how those dollars get used. But I really like the idea. I am sold out to the idea that I can help when I return a tithe dollar. I help my local church, my region, and the worldwide church with that $1 of tithe. That's an amazing structure. I love that concept, and I believe it was divinely inspired. So that connection of building a mechanism of moving dollars from the local space to the worldwide space, I think is an astounding and amazingly divinely inspired mechanism.
Okay.
And that has been also the biggest critic that we have had. A lot of the money leaves from the local church, but you said something that has stuck with me already, that my $1 makes an impact around the world. And I don't think our people, I don't think our members get that concept, because we think so much about ourselves and what's happening locally. What are some of the strategies you would suggest that can help us as financiers, to help us to educate our members in understanding the impact that they play in moving this church worldwide?
Yeah, I really like what Randy mentioned in terms of that connection and getting that message out there. So in reference to strategies, because you're right, it's true that not many are aware of exactly how their tithe dollars and even local offerings given, because some local offerings go all the way up as well and throughout the world, how they support the mission of the church. So something that comes to mind is something as what we're doing right now, having continued dialogue, continued discussions on various levels with various people, just trying to be able to share the message, to share the information, to kind of inform. Continued transparency as well in worker meetings and pastor-teacher meetings, office meetings, if we're having town hall meetings with members, church members, continued types of things like that just allow the information to get all the way to where it needs to get, because it's so beautiful. And even as of late, recently, I've been hearing a lot of various things that kind of hurt my heart, because it makes me realize that there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's not necessarily the person's fault that they're not aware of certain things, but there is a lot of misinformation. And I appreciate this pastors roundtable and things such as this to help us to connect information and what our church is about, the mission of our church, and how our church is structured financially and otherwise, to each person that's a part of the church, right? Because we're not only as leaders, we're not the church. The church is every single
Everybody. Like
and so using social media, graphics, print, some of those as well, but I think just continued dialogue and discussion.
Yeah, getting back to the question, Dr. Henry, I want to say this one thing. Everyone involved in the Adventist financial system, meaning either you are an administrator or simply an employee or whatever, you receive some sort of benefit from the church, should justify their assistance with the local church. And this is how you connect mission and money. This is how you maintain that level, that balance that needs to be kept between mission, spirituality, and finances. Those three elements are those are the three dimensions in church administration: mission, finances, and spirituality. So the moment you disconnect them, the moment you stay too far away from any of the three, you get in a huge disconnect right there. And that's why some of our younger generation now can see through that, because they believe and they perceive a disconnect right there. So everyone should maintain that connection that justifies the reason why they are in this system. And so, to me, I believe that sustainability is something that we have to try to achieve. And for our church, Elisa was mentioning something. There is a lot of information out there, people perceptions, and so I believe that the only sustainable competitive advantage that the church has is the reputation. Now, the day we lose that, we will be in some serious trouble.
Yeah. And another part to that question, and I definitely like your answers and your responses from all of you, just coming up with creative ways on how to educate our members and educate our pastors as well and employees on how our finances are used for mission. But according to your just perception and your knowledge of how these finances are used at various levels, what do you perceive as the biggest expense on our finances? What's the biggest one? It may be different from the different levels that you operate in, but I'm just curious to know that.
Yeah, I think my colleagues would agree with me. It's a pretty slam dunk answer, actually. That is our people. It's people. And when you think about the structure of the organization, probably the largest it is the largest segment of people that we employ for mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are our local pastors and our local teachers. That's probably the single largest group, I'm talking worldwide, that we use these dollars for to help the mission go forward. And so, I know a lot of members in a local church, for instance, don't necessarily see that tithe dollar helping them. But without the tithe dollar paying for their pastor, they wouldn't have a pastor. They would not have a leader in their church. They likely, and there are portions of tithe dollars that go to fund our schools, not completely, but portions of it. They likely would not have teachers and educators in their schools. So, those are somewhat kind of background tithe dollars that the member doesn't see like actively. Some of the active tithe dollars that they do see are dollars that come back through the conference into the local church in terms of evangelism dollars and mission dollars that are provided for the benefit of those kinds of efforts. Those are also tithe dollars that we see locally. They're not always obvious to the local member, but they're very real. And if you pull those tithe dollars away from that local space, your structure basically collapses. And so that's vital. And so I would say, in short answer to your question, it's people, and I would say it's primarily pastors and teachers.
Okay. And that's at every level, or is it the conference? When you look at the tithe dollar that's spent by the conference, the majority of that will go to the employees, I'm assuming. But when it goes to the union, is it the same way? The majority of that goes to the employees. When it goes to the division, the majority of that goes to the employees as well?
It is, I would say that's a qualified yes. And here's why I say qualified, because the wider organization, I'm talking unions and division and general conference, have different roles financially, and there are large portions of those dollars that address the employment of people, but a larger portion of those dollars is sent back through the organization for various ministry elements, education, evangelism. Huge dollars go back. I mean, we receive them up and then we send them back, and those dollars address those needs. So it's a little bit, the structure allows for, yes, to pay for those people, but also sends resources back through the organization for large ministry and mission needs.
So oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elder.
Yes, Roger. There was. I like to say almost the same thing that Elder Randy said, but differently. But also, I want to go back to the first question one of the viewers sent. That was like, why is the local conference, a storehouse, something like that? Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So here's what happened. First of all. The storehouse is a biblical concept, okay? Although the Bible doesn't say, because there was no such thing as a conference back in the day. What happened is you have to ask yourself a question. Where do we send the funds that they can be socialized and maximized? That is a question that should be asked. And so the founders of the church, they say, you know what? Let's create a business model. And so they created this business model. And this business model is the local conference. And so and from there derives now where you have 5 baskets. And those 5 baskets is where you put the money. One is church ministry. Church ministry is anything related to church, whether it is evangelism, pastoral salaries, whether it is retirement for, whatever you spend on a worker and whatever you spend on a church, whether it's an evangelism, whatever, goes into that big basket. And this is even how the accounting system is structured in the church. Then you have the other basket, which is like educational ministry. That's where all your schools goes, and teachers, location that you give to the schools. And you have also the supporting ministry. And that has to do with a lot of other ministries that are within the conference or the union or the division that falls into that category. And one of the biggest basket is administration. Now you say, but how do you now calculate and divide and make sure that each one of these baskets is doing what is called for? Well, the fun thing is that if you don't put an expense in one of these baskets, the auditors will tell you that you have misplaced that particular function, that you have to go back and rewrite the entry and all kinds of stuff, because money for evangelism cannot be put into, let's say, administration of the building. You can't do that. And so when you socialize the funds, when you send all the church funds, meaning the tithe, to the conference, that's when we can take care of a global insurance that we have, which is right now very heavy, I can tell you. That's when you can take care of uh, pastoral salaries. So to maintain a pastor at least for every 4 churches or every 3 churches in our, because some of the little churches will not be able to sustain not even a Bible worker locally. And so it is in the socialization of the funding that we find the nearest perfect business model. And with all of that, still we find a lot of way to criticize it, because rightly so, if it's not fitting your needs, you're not going to feel comfortable. But this is how this whole thing is structured, and it has done fairly well so far.
So before we move on, I think the question that's being begged to ask and be answered is, how does this tithe dollar, how does the tithe dollar split up? So I know we have a graphic on that, and I'm not sure who would want to speak to it, but Anselm, if you can put that graphic up, and we can probably speak to the breakdown of the tithe dollar.
So as
I know this is at the conference level, right?
I think I've got 2 graphics, and they go beyond just both of them go beyond the local conference. However, as I work on trying to figure out how to make this show up for everybody, I want to throw another question in here on top of that, just to kind of make it maybe a little practical for a church like mine. I'll use my church as an example. So I have one church. I don't have a second church. I've got a K through 8 school where we employ, I think it's about 3 or 4 conference hired teachers. How much tithe would my church need to be able to return in order to be self-sufficient? How much does it cost? What tithe is coming back that would say, well, this church doesn't need any help from any other sources to be able to sustain that level of personnel?
All right,
Elise?
so that's a good question. I'll kind of start, and we'll kind of keep going through it. So I'll kind of step back and go from a pastoral perspective, and then for schools. So in Florida, we try to allow $300,000 worth of tithe for one pastor, and that's about a third, right? So a third of the tithe dollar goes to pay the pastor.
So pastors get paid in Florida Conference $300,000. Where do I sign up? Do you take our youth personnel department? Can I?
I'm moving.
Where do I sign?
Oh,
I know, right?
I'm coming to work for the Florida Conference.
yes.
Clarify that. That's good comment. So let me clarify that. All right, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback.
We get another echo.
All right.
All right.
Okay, I think we're good. And so $100,000 is the cost of a pastor. That's not what the pastor takes home, but that's a cost of the pastor. When you add up healthcare, retirement, and all of the other items that he does not or she does not take home, that's the cost. And so 1/3, 300,000, you have 100,000, that's 1/3. 1/3 of the tithe dollar is what is used to pay our pastors in the field, to fund our pastors. And so then from the teacher perspective, you have almost another third, about 25%, so 1/4 really, of the tithe dollar goes towards paying for the cost of our teachers. And so that's about 55, almost 60% there of the tithe dollar. And so if you add on to the 300,000, you'd probably add another, let's say another 150,000 of revenue that comes in from the local church to account for that. And then you have all of the other miscellaneous ministries and areas, including office administration, human resources, making sure that property development is taken care of, and all of these other things as we work with the local church on a area scale and on a regional scale as well. And so from the perspective, if you have several teachers at the church, then the church is the owner of the school if it's a constituent school, and this church is responsible for about 60%, 60 to 65% of the teacher's cost. And so however many teachers there are, they should be able to either fund that, and really it's the difference between what they're funding and what tuition is driving. So I'm saying a lot of different pieces here. And so I'll kind of try and see if I can.
Can we get a number out of that? 3 teachers, 1 pastor. What kind of
three
teachers, 1 pastor? What kind of number are we looking at?
We're looking at maybe $1 million or so.
So my church should be returning $1 million in tithe in order to sustain, in order to compensate what's coming back to that local church and that's per millennium, per decade, that's per year.
That's per year.
You got a lot of work to do there, Anselm.
Yeah.
My Lord. So the idea then that when people say we're sending all of this money away to the conference and we're not getting any of it back, that sounds like that's saying that we're not sending enough up to the conference in order to compensate for what we're getting back.
Well, I think that's what Pastor Elias was saying earlier. He used the word socialize. I use the term the stronger helping the weaker. It kind of all means the same thing. When we collectively gather this resource together, then we redeploy those dollars where they're needed. We can fund a church that isn't passing $100 or $1 million of tithe. We can still provide a pastor and 3 teachers in that space. And even more than that, in the very rural areas of the church where the population is much more sparse, we can still have pastors and teachers in those spaces because we have collectively gathered those resources and redeployed them in a way that we can still do ministry in those areas. Otherwise, we look very much, if we don't do it that way, we look very much like a congregation, like the congregational model that says, okay, I better put my church in the middle of a city, in a higher rent district where I can gather members who have maybe a higher income, and we can gather some resources and we can pay 4 or 5 pastors and maybe we can start a school there. That's and all the money is kept there, but you don't have the reach. You have you don't have the reach that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has out throughout all of the areas, whether they be densely populated, whether there be high socioeconomic ability or less socioeconomic ability, and also worldwide. So the model has worked well. It has flaws and it is challenging, but it gives us the ability to minister across all areas of our landscape.
Awesome. Let's get into this.
But
this graphic.
that has been the complaint has been that. Well, actually, we haven't said that. We just don't say that, and so our churches are like they're making up their own concept. Why are we so secretive? What is it that we're afraid to share when it comes to money? To our churches. That makes sense. I could sit here and I could stand as a pastor and tell my members, hey, we are not carrying the load we need to carry, but look at the benefits we're getting. But we don't do that. Why is it such a secret to our members what's happening?
Pastor, I love that question because it's a bit of a catch-22 for me, because I have made that speech in more places at more times than I can count. But it's just, we don't tell the story well as a church, if I can put it that way. We have a great story. We have an awesome story when it comes to how we do business in the church, but we don't tell the story well for some reason. We can't. It's not. I don't think it's not as. I wouldn't characterize it as being secretive, as we just haven't figured out a mechanism to tell the story. Because I'd love to tell the story. this is a passion for me as at this level of the church. I love our financial structure. I love the way it works. It has lots of flaws, but I love it. And I'm not secretive about it, but we just haven't figured out a mechanism to share that story really, really well.
Wow. So let's jump into this graphic, Roger. And it's just going to go right across the screen in a very kind of a rookie way here.
Okay.
But all right, I think this is the one that I got from Elisa. So Elisa, I know you probably cannot see it except in the Skype window there, but I'm assuming you know what's on there. So, and this is from Florida Conference. So if you could just kind of break down for our audience, you get $1. How is that $1 in tithe money spent? How is it distributed?
So from a summary perspective, you have 78 cents or 78 cents, 78%. You see there to the left that stays in the local field, in the local conference. And then you have 22% that goes on up through North America and throughout the world. So I'll touch the 78 cents first, and that is the majority of the tithe dollar. You have 35 cents, I'm going to round up, 34.6, but 35 cents that's for the missionaries in the field, our pastors, our ministerial team, those that are serving our churches. And then you have 25 cents for the missionaries in our schools, our educators. And yes, they are missionaries in our schools because we have up to a third of our baptisms coming from young people in our schools. And then you have 7.7, almost 8 cents going towards conference administration. So this includes payroll, HR services, from slew of employees, multiple employees, treasury support for multiple churches, building project support, membership and clerk support, magazines, risk management, safety support, plan giving and estate management support, administrators. That's all in that 8 cents. And then you have 4.8, so about 5 cents is for youth and children's ministries, and that includes Pathfinders and Adventurers and Vacation Bible School training and various things to facilitate ministry for our young people. And then you have church planting and evangelism. And I'm going to lump those two that you see there into the 3%. And so it's print and spoken evangelism. And so that's what that is for the benefit of the local church. And then you have 1.2 cents for local church appropriations. So direct appropriations that are either for the benefit of the local church or are seen directly in the local church. Then you have the 1.2% for trust services and communications. That's related to plan giving as well. And then 0.5 cents of that goes to the church and adult ministries, women's ministries, men's ministries, prayer ministries, you name it, disabilities ministries, that's all there. And then 0.3 cents is for our camp meetings. And so that's the 78 cents, the majority of the tithe dollar that goes towards those various areas. I'll take a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, I want to applaud you. I'm excited that youth ministries get almost 4-5 cents of that. I mean, when I look at the adult, because in youth ministries, we tend to say the adults get everything, but it looks as if we have not been told the truth.
Now that breakdown varies by conference, or is that pretty much the same across all of our conferences?
It varies by a cent or 2 or 3 by conference. So it's essentially that in large format, but there are some variations by a few cents conference to conference.
And here's I think an important question is, who makes those decisions? Who gets to determine how that dollar is sliced up?
That's a good question. So that's the governing board, right? The executive committee is the governing board of at the conference level. And so generally speaking, and this is, much of this has kind of come from time to time, year after year after year, that this is the format. This is the slicing that works, but it doesn't mean that it's a slicing that has to remain in perpetuity. And so our governing board, executive committee, approves the budget that administration through the Treasury Department and that administration presents and determines those slices.
Okay. Well, let me follow up with the question. By the way, wonderful diagram. I like it. uh, but let me ask you this, and for any of the treasurers. So we talked about how this system is good, but is there a need for a restructuring of this system to meet mission? Or are we saying that this structure right now is working well and there's no need to touch it?
Let me take a stab at that, Doctor. Thank you. Maybe structuring isn't the right word, but certainly a continual evaluation of it is absolutely necessary. Let me make let me try a statement of a pretty obvious example, possibly. The way the Seventh-day Adventist Church functioned, let's say 100 years ago. We were young. We were probably 40 years old about that time, give or take a few years. The way the ministry functioned and the message was delivered was dramatically different 100 years ago than it is today. Clearly, we did not have this kind of methodology that we're doing today in social media and through all kinds of electronic means. That was not available back then. So we have to shift our thinking, and that's a graphic example. I mean, I could make it more nuanced, but that
I was going to say that wasn't happening for many of us 4 months ago.
There you go. There you go. So no, and I will let me piggyback on that. I think COVID has taught us some things that we probably knew them, but we were not this has forced us to grapple with the realities of how the gospel is delivered, and we can actually do it. We figured out that we can do the gospel like this. And I think that really opens some doors for us in terms of a delivery. So in answer to your question, we have to constantly evaluate how we deliver the gospel. The gospel isn't changing. The gospel is the gospel. But how we deliver it, what mechanics we use to get it out there, what mechanisms we use to share it, we have to evaluate that constantly. And right now, that's a really quickly moving target. And I love the fact, and at the North American Division level, we've hired quite a number of millennials that help old guys like me. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but we have to. It keeps us thinking in terms of how we get the message out there and what methods we use to get the message out there. We've got to really begin to evaluate, continue to evaluate how that happens. And so, is a restructure necessary? I'm not sure a restructure is necessary, but certainly an openness and willingness and an ability to continue a conversation about how those dollars are moved and how we use them to deliver the gospel.
Yeah, I like to add my little sense on this. And I agree wholeheartedly with Randy that perhaps the structure might not be necessarily needed to be changed. However, we need to look at a couple things: is the business model and also duplication. What are we doing? One of the major things that we have somewhat failed to recognize is exactly what is the role of every level of the organization. And when we understand the roles clearly, what is the union to do, what is the division to do, conferences, local church, the member, everybody, what is my role? Because you have when you have the lower level looking at the higher level as, hey, you guys are doing the wrong thing, and then the higher level say, no, you are the one doing the wrong thing, and then you start having this thing going back and forth there. It's really distracting the mission, and I believe that we have to take a deep look into the business model that was established 170 years ago, And we have to also ensure that we eliminate duplication in the system, and we have to ensure that the roles are clearly defined in the organization. When we define roles in any, I mean, you have you are the manager of a McDonald's or a Burger King. You have to define the role of everybody there to have a clear layout as to how mission will happen.
All right, that's a great segue into that next question.
Well, let me jump in here. Twice we have said the concept of duplicity of resources or duplication of resources. So the question was asked by a viewer: in light of COVID-19, are we re-looking at how we spend that 78% of our tithe dollar? But the question also begs to the larger picture of the duplicity of entities in the same territory that are meeting and reaching probably the same people. From a financial perspective, and you talk about a business model, does this structure really make sense that we have organizations that are the same in the same territory doing the same thing? Could we not consider consolidating?
Okay, hold on, Roger. Hold on. Listen, we're getting ready to get into a spot that if you're watching right now on YouTube or Facebook, you need to tag somebody. Share this, because where we're getting ready to jump off now, even though we don't have a lot of time left, this is going to segue into our discussion for next week. Remember, we're talking about mission and structure. And next week, we're going to be talking about ethnic structures. That's state conferences, regional conferences, HBCUs, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we talk about what Roger just mentioned in terms of duplication of resources or of entities, I think, Roger, what's got, I'm hearing a lot of echo. I'm not sure if you guys are hearing that. And not sure
it's
why.
coming
in and out.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
Anyway,
it's from your area. You're part of the studio.
Stop it, man. Y'all always blame my studio.
You sure know how to deflate tension. I must give you that much. So I'm gonna just pick it up here. Treasurers, help us. And trust me, I'm not saying because you say this is what must happen, but the business model. How is that? How are our duplicity of resources helping our business model and our mission?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I don't like the fuzziness of the question. I want to put it out there exactly what it is. In the state
We've got to
of
hold
Florida,
it for next week, so I've got to be fuzzy this week.
No. In the state of Florida, in the South, on the East Coast, we have two conferences in most cases covering the same territories. We're paying the same people often to reach the same people. And that's really the heart of his question. He didn't want to come out and say it like that, so I'm saying it for him. And again, we're trying to be real, because these are questions, especially in this time frame, that are being floated out. When you've got all these racial tensions and all of this stuff floating around in society right now, these are some things that our people are asking. They're asking these questions. Why do we have a black conference school over here and we don't really have white conferences anymore? But why do we have another conference over here and we're spending the same money covering the same territory? Is this financially, does this make sense financially? Is this something that if we were able to find a better way that could really make our resources more effective? That's the question that Roger wanted to ask, that I'm trying to help him articulate.
He didn't mince words, did he?
And we might be looking for a new host come next week.
So can we add to the question to say, does it make sense missionally, and does it make sense spiritually? Because the foundation of the administration of our church is based on those three elements: mission, finances, and spirituality. So if it only makes sense in one end, does it make sense in the other two legs? So we have to understand it this way, because it's very easy for me to stand up and say, oh, we don't need black conferences or regional conference. That's not, I don't think that this is just a statement that should be said like that. I think the same way that you don't might not need some in some area, the same way you don't need the others in some area as well. Because what you end up doing here is about the viability test. Which conference? Because some of the regional conferences are stronger financially than other conferences where they are. And so who do you get rid of? So that's the type of question that you have to ask yourself. I can give you many examples of conferences that will not pass the viability test. They are not financially viable, which is not simple regional conference or they call black conferences. That does not make sense. If it has in our financial system but the viability test, then we need to know whether it's reaching the mission and is also maintaining the providing spirituality to our people, nurturing. So when you look at the viability test, you have to look into the tithe strength, asset and liabilities, working capital, and plant asset. Those four elements of any organization, you have to look into it and then say, because I will tell you my honest opinion. We have 58 fields in the North American division, and some of those fields have to cover 3, 4, 5 states. And I will tell you, the question is back to ask, do we need more? What I believe is that if we reduce the duplicity and we enhance a business model that provide a saving to everybody, I think that we should go back to the spirit of prophecy in Christian service, where it says that our forces must be organized to do a larger work. And that's what we are missing here. And it's a proper organization, a proper business model that will enhance an expansion of the mission, and then Christ will come.
So that almost sounds like that gives room to consider the idea of some Hispanic conferences, or if it's not just on money but on mission, then it seems to make the conversation a much larger conversation than what we typically have.
And I would answer that by saying, it may or may not look like another conference, but for sure we had better pay attention to reaching different people groups very intentionally. And let me use maybe a graphic example. It's going to be way easier, Pastor, if you go into a black community and preach the gospel and deliver the gospel. That's going to be more effective than if I do it. Okay, as a white male. It's cultural.
Sure.
We're going to do better missionally if we reach out to cultures with people who can relate to that culture. If you're sending people into a place with an individual who can't relate to that culture, the mission is going to be hindered and the effectiveness is going to be stymied. So one thing I love about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and we don't have it right, we don't have it all right. Lots of efficiencies can be achieved by doing some consolidations and evaluating the structure, as Elias said earlier. But one thing I love about the Seventh-day Adventist Church is its diversity. We are probably the most diverse church in the world, or we're very close to it, if we're not. So ways and means to reach the diverse nature of our church is paramount. We have there; it's so diverse, and we have and that's what's challenging financially. It gets challenging because we want to try our best to reach every different culture we touch, and that means we've got to do it with people that relate to those individual cultures to do it most effectively. But I think in the black community, maybe at least originally it started with a conference structure, I don't think going forward it necessarily has to look like that. It can look differently, but we have to figure out ways to reach our different cultures in the most efficient way. And to me, I love that about the Adventist Church. We have a lot of work to do to make it work totally efficiently. And we have some, you put it out there earlier. We have some racial challenges in the church. We just do. And if we ignore that, we've got our heads in the sand. We have some work to do. But I think by God's grace, as we work together in the very multicultural environment that we have, He will help us do that, and He'll help us reach the many, many people groups that we have in the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that too. You mentioned the working together and moving forward and reaching others. I will say in reference to this question, the structure that we have now can be enhanced by continued and intentional collaboration and working together across fields, across conferences, across the unions and various areas, particularly where there may be duplicity, as you mentioned, Pastor Paul, but that increased and just continual collaboration. We have that in many areas. We have conferences that are in the same field that have put on different prayer conferences and different events together, health initiatives and the like. And I think the structure that we have now could benefit from that continual collaboration and working together for a common purpose. We may be reaching various multiple groups and different groups, but still working together and collaborating will be a benefit to God's work.
I give you an example briefly. When I was conference president in New York Conference, that's upstate, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany. In the city of Syracuse, we have two churches, two Hispanic churches, one for the Northeastern Conference, one for the New York Conference. They were just 2 blocks away. One church had 58 members, and the other church has about 20-something members. The one church that had the 20-something member was the one that belongs to my conference, and they had a building. The other conference church did not have a building. They had been renting for over 7 years. And maybe merging those two churches was not the easy thing. However, the only way to do it was I sat down with the president in that conference and I said, look, I want you to take over the church. I mean, no conference want to lose churches, but somebody has to give. Somebody has to give. So I say, I want you to take care of the church. I'm going to sell you the building for $1. And the Attorney General allows a sale for $1 for a non-for-profit to another non-for-profit of the same organization. So I sold it for $1, and now you have a vibrant church over there. So that's what collaboration looks like.
Yeah,
Wow.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
Wow. But you brought out the point, Elder Zabala, that we kind of tend to look at the finances in its own pot. But you're sharing today that we need to look at the finances, the mission, and the spirituality together to make the decisions on whether we expand or we contract. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Good.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So we've had a lot of questions that have come up in the chat regarding education. I want to hit that right quick. We got like 1 minute. Do I want to do that? Okay. All right. I'm gonna skip that, and sorry, because we've got lots of good questions that have been coming up in the chat.
Yeah.
But I want to give you this opportunity because I promised our guest I was going to give them this opportunity, and I think most of you will be interested in this. For each of you, you serve as the chief financial officers at various levels within the structure of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, local conference, local union or union, and the North American division. I have a sneaky suspicion that there have been times when you guys have been contemplating some of the financial structures at your level or at any other level where you have just said, it's just frustrated you and you just, So here's this question. If there were 2 things that you could change. There's no executive committee, no AdCom, no constituency meeting, no nothing. You just got to write it and do the Yul Brynner thing. So let it be written, so let it be done. You could just make
executive
it so.
orders,
Yeah, you
orders.
could write an executive order for some financial tweak of the financial structure of the church, or financial change, or financial abolishment of something, whatever it is. What two things would you do? What would you change? And you can change it at your level. You could change it at any level above you or below you. Give us two things that you would change about the financial structure of this Seventh-day Adventist church.
Lady first.
Put Elisa on the spot.
All right. Okay, well, I will go first then. So, very good question. And I'll share, some of it may be, what I share may not necessarily be at the conference level, because really and truly we're governed by North American division policy. And so for me, as we're working through certain things from a financial perspective, sometimes North American division policy can feel constricting. But I know it's there for a good reason. Same as we have hedges alongside the roads, they're there for great reasons. So this first thing that I will share is in regards to NAD policy, in regards to the use of the tithe dollar. We talked a little bit about it. We talked about, for pastors, 100% of the tithe dollar, and let me rephrase that. For pastors, we can use tithe dollars to pay 100% of their costs. Missionaries in our churches, in our fields. For teachers, North American division policy has it that we can use the tithe dollar to pay 30% of a teacher's cost. And back then, that has actually come up for review from time to time and discussion, and there's been committees to review that. To determine, should it be more than just 30% of the tithe dollar, or should it stay at 30%? Are our teachers truly ministers in our schools? So that's something that when I see it, and as I'm working through the final year-end adjustments to make sure that we are within North American division policy, that we have not gone beyond the 30% of the tithe dollar for teachers, that gives me a little bit of angst, just a little bit. But I understand that where we are is where we are today, and we may not be there tomorrow, and it has been under review. So that's one of the things that comes to mind. And this next one that comes to mind that I'm laughing and smiling because I know it's difficult, and I have to couch it under all things being equal, but it's the wage scale factor. And so many of our members think that our workers, our pastors, our teachers, our office workers, that we are paid, over and abundantly more than industry standard. The truth is, we are paid well enough to live comfortably and to be able to manage our funds appropriately. But when it's compared to industry standards, in terms of, we have doctors and, those with master's degrees, our educators, our pastors, our teachers, we have such a wealth of expertise in our human resources. We're really not able to pay them from a financial perspective what they are worth, what we are worth. Now, of course, serving God has extraordinary blessings, and for me as working in the office, I worked in corporate America. When I moved to work in Florida Conference, I took a $20,000 pay cut, and that was 13 years ago. So I'm well beyond the $20,000 differential, but I can tell you this was the best move ever for me. And we have committed, dedicated workers that are sold out for God. And it's not about the money, and it's not about making industry standard. But if I could change something, all things being equal, because that means we need the funds coming in to be able to support those higher salaries, that would be one. So those two are two of the things that come to mind with that question.
All right. All right.
Okay, so my my two items, I'm going to try to simplify it because it goes far as spending probably 3/4 of the time I have been in church work and administration, analyzing those things. First of all, I am going to go back to the one I mentioned earlier, which is the duplicity, eliminating the duplicity of departmental work or finances and spending the trying to spend the same dollar twice in some areas. I will try to eliminate that and ensure that we place those funds back into the local church. That includes, of course, the and a serious analysis of those percentages that we presented and how we divide the tithe dollar and how it is spent and where it is spent. We believe and we always tell that ministry happens in the local church, but there is a lot of service that is being done for the organization within the levels of the organization, whether it's the conference, the union, the division, of the GC. There are certain things that needs to be maintained. However, when we come to the duplicity and the business model, we got to make some changes there. My other one, I have to admit, that has to do with the way we budget, the way we allocate those resources. And I am glad that Elisa said that they're budgeting 4% for youth ministry. And so a lot of conferences have to budget differently because their needs are differently. And some conference where you have a large concentration of Native American, for example, you have to budget towards Native American ministry. Where you have inner city, you have to budget towards inner city. So wherever you have to budget towards that. That means, and that is intentionality. But here's what I'm going to say. Money should follow vision, not duty. Money should follow mission, not structure. It should follow people and not program. And money should follow growth and progress and not maintenance. That is what money should be following in the church, whether it's locally, whether it's a conference, whether it's union, and whether it's division or general conference. So I tried to simplify my 2 points there.
All right.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I would. Mine looks a little bit like what Elias just said. My first one, and that is the beauty of our church is the autonomy that is provided by every level of the organization. Our constituent model, if I can put it that way, is a great model in terms of organizational structure. But the huge frustration that I have is that when you want to think about being efficient, that efficiency has to flow through those constituent levels of the church. And those constituencies have such autonomy that if you say, for instance, let me use this example. We've got, I don't know, 10 colleges in the North American division. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head, but let's say it's 10. But somebody on paper said, you know what, we could organize this just right. We really only need 4. Well, everybody thinks that's a good idea on paper until you say mine is being eliminated. And then it gets to be a problem. Well, then, so now we're fighting efficiency, really, I mean, an efficiency that could really make a difference financially in the church. But you're fighting the structure of the church where different constituencies would literally have to vote themselves out of existence or vote one of their major institutions out of existence to achieve the efficiencies that somebody thought was a good idea on paper. So our structure fights a little bit against the ability to be efficient as you might if you could look at the whole organization as a total and say, okay, here's what we need to do. Let's not duplicate services across the organization. Let's consolidate. Well, that's nice on paper and in theory, but to get that through a constituent process is really a challenge. And so that's one of my things that I would like to change, to figure out how to do that more efficiently. The other thing is really, Elisa mentioned the one I was thinking of. I was thinking very specifically, though, in the context of our education system, to attract individuals who have the education to teach our children at all levels of the church. It is getting very much harder because we can't pay a PhD who can come into one of our universities and teach science what the public system can pay. We just can't do it. And so you're finding you're either getting and I say this carefully, you're either getting a substandard product, or you're having to find, and they're out there, you're having to find a missionally motivated person who's willing to walk away from what they could earn out there, which is in the education space, maybe twice or more what we can pay them, and just come in as Elisa did. I mean, she did it in the financial area. You're walking away from a livelihood and coming in and taking a lot less pay. So I wish we could figure out how to fund that kind of resource so we could get really good, solid, qualified people and pay them what they're worth.
Wow. Well, listen, I'm just sitting back listening to these great ideas from our leaders here. And you know what? I'm excited that we have the right people in the right position to go ahead and do some of these things, because I think it's really going to help our denomination. I want to also thank you all so much for taking the time out to be with us on our show today. I think that the information that you gave to us, the engagement, and just being relevant. And I think that's something that is like a breath of fresh air, hearing from our leaders that, listen, we want to be relevant. Here's some issues that we have, and here's some things that we want to do about it. Pastor Wade and Pastor Paul, I think we need a part 2 with these treasurers. I don't know about this.
Listen.
Dr. Henry, they were not just only relevant, they were also real. I have to be honest that actually these treasurers are real. And if God allows me an opportunity to work with them, I don't know how different it would be, but I would be happy to work with them. But thank you so much again. If it's all right with you, we want to invite our guests to kind of spew through the comments that our viewers had. Some of the questions we were able to answer, some of them we were not. Maybe you may have some insights as to how to help answer some of their questions. So we invite you to go through the comments on the Pastors Roundtable, and then we invite our viewers to continue to ask questions, and we'll try to keep putting resources in there so that you will continue this growth of learning, and hopefully together we can really usher in Christ's return.
And under the comment section, listen, give us a shout out where you're viewing us from. Tell us, I'm viewing you from New York or Jersey or California or across the waters. Put that down in there. We want to see who you are. Put down the conference that you are part of, because it helps us to continue to pray for your conference as well as we go and navigate through this pandemic. And one other thing we want to say before we close today, again, to be in a CFO position in a pandemic and still have hope and vision is commendable. I just want to appreciate you for doing that. Still have vision. Still know that the Lord is in control and leading this church through a pandemic. We praise God for that. Listen, next week, I think Pastor Paul, you kind of hinted towards what's going to happen next week. If you want to just elaborate on that just a little bit, what's going on next week? All right,
we're going to have that discussion. We're going to have that discussion on next week.
That
discussion where we're talking about the ethnic structures within the church and its connection to the intersection of mission and structure. We've got with us Dr. Leslie Pollard, who's been with us once before, but he's going to be back with us. He is the president of our one and only historically black college and university, Oakwood University. He's going to be with us. We have a few other guests that come from various walks of life, particularly as it pertains with their intersection and interaction with some of the structures that we would consider ethnic structures and those that are not. So we're going to have that discussion to see, is there a viability? How do those ethnic structures impact the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in 2020? And so you don't want to miss that discussion. You've got a little springboard of what we heard today from our CFOs. It said, look, that's a discussion that has to happen not just in one area. It can't happen just from the financial spot. It's got to also include the missional impact that those things have on the structure. And so I'm excited about that. We're looking forward to that. We've got a couple of mystery guests that are going to be with us.
I could add that one of those mystery guests, I think we'll be the first. This will be the first time that in the question of the regional work, we would also be talking about the Hispanic work. So we're happy to have with us Elder Jose Cortez, who is the Associate Director of the Ministerial Department of the North American Division, joining us to help us with the contextualizing the Hispanic work along with the regional work in this mission structure concept or conversation and the ethnicity of our church.
All right. So you heard it. Next week. Again, thank you to our guests. And listen, we want to thank our viewers for listening to the Pastor's Round Table, where we keep ministry
relevant,
resourced,
and real. God bless.
God bless you guys. We'll see you next week.